Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Teena Jha, you're watching Perspective. After months of negotiations and over 2 years of conflict, the first phase of the Gaza peace plan was successfully implemented on Monday. Under the agreement, Hamas returned all living Israeli hostages, while Israel freed nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. US President Donald Trump, who brokered the ceasefire agreement, described it as a historic dawn in a new Middle East. World leaders, many of whom attended the Gaza Peace Summit, have welcomed the development with cautious optimism, expressing hope that it will pave the way for lasting peace in the region. Reaffirming its support for the Gaza peace plan, India reiterated that it stands for peace in West Asia and the resolution of issues through dialogue and diplomacy. In a social media post, Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed President Trump's sincere efforts to bring peace to the region and also welcomed the release of all hostages after more than 2 years of captivity. However, the big question now is, what lies ahead for Gaza and for Israel? Given the complex history of conflict in the region, can this fragile peace hold? And what will it take to translate this initial breakthrough into lasting stability and reconstruction? That's what we will discuss on the program today. Joining me are two distinguished guests. Delighted to welcome on the program today Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. Ambassador, always a pleasure to have you on the show with us. And I'm also pleased to welcome Dr. Pratap Singh, Professor, Department of Political Science, Banaras Hindu University. Professor, welcome to Sansad TV. Yeah. Ambassador, let's begin the conversation with you. So the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, it's been implemented successfully. There's been exchange of hostages and prisoners, and there's also end of active fighting in the region. It's definitely a welcome step, which the world leaders, including our Prime Minister, has extended support to. But the biggest question on everyone's minds across the world is, what next? But before we delve into that, help us and our viewers understand what, according to you, were the key enablers, the key factors that made this breakthrough possible. For 2 years, we've seen extensive fighting, there's been chaos, there's been devastation, destruction, but finally it's a welcome move that there's temporary ceasefire. We hope the next phases of the Gaza peace plan will also succeed, but help us understand what has made this initial breakthrough possible.
Well, Teena, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. Well, what made this initial breakthrough possible is certainly the pressure which President Donald Trump brought to bear, both on Israel and on the other side. He was in constant touch with Egypt and Qatar, which, along with the United States, are the key mediators in this dispute. And his ceaseless pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu made him relent at least to this initial phase. But as you said, there are challenges which remain. I think that following the brokering of this multi-phase peace deal between Israel and Hamas, which saw an initial ceasefire and hostage release, major challenges remain for the subsequent phases involving demilitarization, governance, and reconstruction. So the long-term success of the plan is hampered by a lack of trust between the parties, and also domestic political obstacles, and of course the sheer complexity of rebuilding Gaza after years of war. Israel and Hamas continue to have fundamental disagreements despite the multi-phase peace deal brokered by President Trump. And the key points of contention center on security issues. And then, as I said, the future of governance of Gaza, right, and the final status of a Palestinian state. Now, first of all, the primary obstacle is that Hamas has demanded a full and complete withdrawal of all Israeli troops from Gaza. The Trump peace plan, however, envisions Israel maintaining an open-ended military presence within a security perimeter and along the Philadelphia corridor bordering Egypt, which is a major sticking point for Hamas. Now, another sticking point is that while the peace plan requires Hamas to decommission its weapons, it has resisted this key condition in the past and has initially rejected it again. It is rejecting the demilitarization terms, which are part of the peace plan. So its full and verifiable disarmament is critical to secure Gaza, but no clear enforcement mechanism exists for this process. Let me mention that the third very important aspect is the destruction of the tunnel infrastructure. The Israeli government has specified that a major goal is the destruction of Hamas's extensive tunnel network. This poses a significant operational challenge with uncertainty over how this can be carried out and who will carry out and monitor this process. Then, of course, let me mention that another important hurdle is the withdrawal of Israeli forces, because the deal outlines a phased withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, but lacks a specific timeline. So this ambiguity is possibly going to lead to friction as the Palestinians and regional partners push for a complete and timely exit. Let me
Absolutely,
mention the
you're right. So there may have, both sides may have agreed on the initial phase, which was perhaps the easier one, because it had been more than 2 years of conflict, and of course the devastation on both sides was huge, not just in terms of loss to infrastructure, but also loss to significant lives, and that perhaps may have pushed both sides to agree to a ceasefire, but a lasting peace in the region and the sticking points in the 20-point peace plan is something which we'll all have to wait and watch on how those are implemented or whether they'll be implemented at all. So we will discuss all of that in due course of the program. Professor, your initial thoughts on what this deal means, given the history of conflict in the region? In the wake of what US President Donald Trump said, he called it a historic dawn in a new Middle East. What are your views? Do you see this as a genuine turning point in West Asia, or it's a merely temporary pause in what can be described as a long and deep-rooted conflict?
Yeah, definitely it is a historic day. But whether it is going to be a lasting peace, enduring peace, again it is questionable. Yeah, because since 7 October 2023, there has been another ceasefire attempt, and this is the third ceasefire. Yeah. So 2 ceasefire attempts failed, and this is the third one. Hopefully this will succeed. And if that is the case, then it definitely will be a historic day. As far as Palestine problem is concerned, it is one of the oldest global problem. Since Balfour Declaration in 1916, this conflict has started between the Palestinians and Israelis. In fact, initially the demand of Palestinians were maximalist. They were not ready to give any land to Jews. But now the tables have turned. Now the Israeli demand is the maximalist, and now Palestinians has been weakened so much. In fact, this ceasefire has also been secured through force. Palestinians have been left with no choice but to accept this force, because more than 70,000 Palestinians have been killed since this war started 2 years back, and the whole of Gaza has been almost destroyed. So, and 90% of the Palestinians has been displaced from Gaza, so they had nothing. So they were almost forced to accept this ceasefire. And as you said, this Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar, they have mediated in this ceasefire, and they have influence over Hamas. Probably they have persuaded them to accept it. Otherwise, Netanyahu was going for total victory. So as far as the prospect of this bringing lasting peace, I'm skeptical. But again, I will love that this is bringing the enduring peace. But the question arises whether Palestine will agree for one-state formula, which is being offered by Israel, and whether Palestinian or Israelis will agree for two-state. So many things are involved, and this Palestinian Hamas has to be disarmed. So if they are disarming, they will be depositing their arms to home. And
that's
what
the
will
biggest challenge going forth, Professor, because within 24 hours of the initial implementation of the phase that we're talking about, Hamas has already executed a number of civilians in Gaza. That's something which is being reported by the international media. How are the next phases going to be implemented is already under cloud, but at least the hope that a conflict that was going on for 2 years has come to a halt. It's an agreement that's been brokered by the American president. The world has hailed it. Regional players like Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, they've played active roles in mediation as well. How critical will their involvement be in sustaining the ceasefire is something that we'll all have to wait and watch as well. But the point that you made, I want to take across to the ambassador. Given the fragile nature of ceasefires, ambassador, in this region, which is often marred by conflict, and Hamas and Israel have a history of conflicts, what confidence-building measures do you think both sides must adopt immediately to prevent a relapse into violence? So we can say the violence has stopped, but peace is still quite far away, and especially if Hamas is not disarmed, if they continue to target civilians, if they continue to target the Israeli forces, the conflict will restart once again. That's the biggest fear.
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with you that any pause in hostilities is undeniably a good thing. Hopes are high, particularly on the ground in Gaza and in Israel, after 2 days of brutal conflict. But as you said, the truth is that many challenges stand in the way. In my opening remarks, I had enumerated some of the major challenges. But as regards this question of trying to enforce a lasting peace, what is very important is the sort of post-war governance that is put in place. Now, a temporary, technocratic Palestinian committee is envisioned to govern Gaza, and it will be overseen by a newly formed board of peace chaired by President Donald Trump.
Right.
However, Hamas has indicated that it still expects to have influence in Gaza's future, while Israel has been resistant to giving a role to the Hamas and even to the Palestinian Authority in regard to the future governance of whatever is set up in the nature of a state or a governance system there. Then again, there is this particular issue of the reforms within the Palestinian Authority, because the peace deal sort of pushes this idea that the eventual handover of control to the Palestinian Authority is contingent on it completing a reform program. But this whole process is very complex and very vague, and therefore there are lots of questions being asked in this context. Then, there is this whole question of the international stabilization force, because this force is planned to provide internal security and to train Palestinian police forces. However, it is very, very unclear which countries will contribute troops and how the force will be funded. So there are many questions which are being asked in regard to the system of governance which is going to be put in place, because that is going to be vital in terms of maintaining and ensuring peace and security in that particular region. However, the differences between Israel and the Palestinians are very fundamental. And that is why they have continued to exist across decades. So ending these differences will be a difficult task. But of course, the world needs peace in that region. And it's very important that all the important leaders of the world side with President Trump in his efforts to broker peace. And our Prime Minister has already voiced his strong support. Let me say that our Prime Minister...
That's right, Ambassador. In fact, the world leaders have voiced support. India has reaffirmed support to the Gaza peace plan. But as you spoke about the international stabilization force, something that America has spoken about, it leads to more questions than answers. Have the world leaders... have you heard, has anyone pledged support to this kind of a force, replacing Israel in the conflict region? And what will be the mandate of the force? Is there any word from any leader across the world who's spoken about extending support or having a difference of opinion on this kind of a force operating in Gaza?
Is that question to me?
Yes, Ambassador.
No, frankly, I haven't seen any categorical statements by world leaders that they would be taking part in this process of setting up the International Stabilization Force and providing manpower. Because without this aspect, the Stabilization Force cannot work. Nonetheless, I think some things will begin to unravel. President Trump will surely pressurize other leaders to take part in this and to provide manpower for the Stabilization Force. But things are very vague at the moment. Nonetheless, I was mentioning that our Prime Minister has lent his support. Our Prime Minister has also always said that the real solution would be a two-state solution. Because unless the Palestinians are given a homeland and a state of their own, they will not be able to live in peace. The struggle will go on. So therefore, the two-state solution is the only solution. But many hardliners in Israel, including Netanyahu, are totally opposed to it. So the way out of this long conflict, and particularly the idea of finding a very, very long-term and binding solution, is a very big challenge. Nonetheless, this is an initial step. Any ceasefire is good because it brings to an end this brutal warfare that is going on. So everyone has been supporting whatever Trump has been doing. Nonetheless, challenges remain, and let's see how the way forward is worked out.
That's right. India has consistently advocated for dialogue, diplomacy, peace, resolution, Professor Singh. In that context, and especially, let's leave aside the challenges for a while. It's a post-conflict phase. Efforts will be required on part of each country to help in rebuilding Gaza, reconstruction of lives. That's something that the global community has to focus on. In the Indian context, how do you see India playing a more proactive role in the region in helping in rebuilding and reconstruction efforts without compromising on our strategic stance, both keeping in mind the relations that we have with Israel and Palestine?
India is in a very comfortable position. India's role is acceptable to Palestine. India's role is acceptable to Israel also. So both the parties are having no problem with India. So India has an important role as far as money is concerned. Definitely the money will come from Europe, America and Arab countries. But as far as the men are concerned, so the labor force has to go from India only for reconstruction, because this in whole of the West Asia, the major labor force is from India only. So India has important role, and we have a very good chance of Indian companies getting the contract over there also. So India has a important role to play in the reconstruction of Gaza. And the best thing about India is that India enjoys the support of both the parties. Neither Palestinians nor Israelis have any problem with India. So India will definitely play an important role in the reconstruction of Gaza.
Ambassador, related question to you as well on India's role, something that Professor also highlighted. India, no doubt, has been playing a constructive role in development assistance, development cooperation across different parts of the world. But given our strategic interests in this region, in West Asia, especially in energy security, we have a significant number of diaspora there, also trade relations. How do you see it shaping our engagement in the post-conflict reconstruction process in Gaza?
The role of India, because of the fact that we have a big diaspora, we are concerned. We want stability in this region. I have served for over 2 decades in the West Asian region. And there is always a very fragile sort of peace structure. India's interest is in maintaining that peace remains established, and that fighting, which keeps breaking out in different parts of West Asia, doesn't happen, doesn't occur. We want peace and stability. There are, however, fundamental conflicts. First, of course, as we were discussing, the long-term solutions in regard to the Palestinian-Israeli dispute and the clashes which are going on need to be found, but there are challenges. Secondly, Iran poses a very big question mark, because Iran has not subscribed to this particular idea that President Trump has promoted. In fact, Iran did not participate in the conference which took place in Sharm el Sheikh. Why? Because Iran is opposed to the existence of Israel, and it doesn't want any dealings with Israel. Iran feels that the Palestinians must get back their state in its entirety. And in fact, when I was posted in Iran, I often used to hear slogans that throw Israel into the sea. This is the sort of thinking which the mullahs who rule Iran have always perpetuated. So Iran is going to be a factor. Of course, there are reports that President Trump is trying to talk to Iran. He has in fact sent feelers. So if Iran can be pacified and some sort of a long-term peace arrangement made, that would be very, very good for the region. At the moment, there are huge challenges. Nonetheless, this initial step is very welcome, because it ends the conflict which was affecting the lives of millions of people, and the sort of suffering that people were undergoing was just terrible. And there is now going to be the focus on reconstruction. The estimated expenditure at the moment is being touted as 55 billion.
Right.
And while some countries will contribute, but it is not going to be easy to raise this enormous amount of money. Nonetheless, let's see how the future unfolds. If things start falling into place, then the willingness of countries to come forward and provide manpower for the stabilization force and for the reconstruction of Gaza would be more easily available. So what is important is how from phase one we move to phase two and demilitarization takes place and Hamas agrees to lay down its arms. If that doesn't happen, then the end of the conflict is not in sight and things might start to heat up.
That's right. So whether this peace process is on track is something that we will perhaps begin to see in the next few weeks or months. But if this peace holds, and let's all hope that this peace holds in the region, Professor, what could it mean for the broader geopolitical dynamics of West Asia? Ambassador explained to us in the context of the Iran-Saudi relations, but what about the normalization efforts with Israel? Also the shifting power equations in the region. How will it define the geopolitics in West Asia?
As far as Iran is concerned, neither Arab world nor America and also Israel is not in favor of giving much role to Iran. But it is also true, without bringing Iran on board, bringing peace in Palestine is very difficult, because Hamas and many other forces which are active against Israel and against America, Hezbollah and Houthis, etc., they are dependent upon Iranian support. So Iran's role is very critical, but thing is that how Iran's role will be acceptable to Arab world and Israel and also America. So that is the great challenge. I'm full agreement with Ambassador. As far as India is concerned, so we are having good relations with all. We are also on good terms with Iran. We also are on good terms with Arab world. We are also on good terms with Israel. So our as far as our strategic interest is concerned, if there is a peace, stability is there, it is in our economic interest, strategic interest. As we all know that large number of Indian diaspora is working in the West Asian countries, different countries, including Israel also. So if there is a peace and stability over there, definitely it will be beneficial to our diaspora community over there. We are also getting large amount of remittances from West Asia. So we have economic interest, strategic interest, and our interest is in the peace and stability over there. But it is true that I don't think Israel will accept any kind of Iranian role, and Arab world also will not be in favor of giving any kind of role to Iran in Gaza. But then again, Hamas, I don't think will be accepting this ceasefire agreement if Iran is not coming on board. And the greatest challenge right now is the role of Hamas, because not only is Iran, even America, Israel, everybody wants not to give any kind of role to Hamas. So that is another sticky point. So many questions are there which has to be answered.
That's right. There are many challenges, but at least this initial phase has happened. There's been a breakthrough. A few months ago, even this would have looked unimaginable. But today, the world has welcomed this, at least the beginning of the peace process and the end of this more than 2-year conflict in Gaza. Let's also hope that another ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine also comes to an end very, very soon. Who brokers that deal is something that only time will tell. But let's hope that peace prevails and there are no ongoing conflicts across any part of the world. With that hope, we'll have to wrap up the conversation. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Professor, for joining us with your valuable thoughts and perspectives. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.